Today we're talking about what nobody tells beginners when you're learning how to share your emotions in relationships. And this is so important because if your expectations are misaligned with reality, it's easy to get confused and frustrated and wonder sometimes, why isn't it working to share my emotions in relationships? Why does it seem like my relationships are actually getting worse or they're struggling more, when really what I'm trying to do is I'm learning to be more honest and more authentic in my relationship. So we're going to talk about two things. Today is going to be part one, and these are really, really important to understand so that you don't get stuck in your own relationship development or want to backtrack and repress emotions or go passive again. There is a textbook for this podcast. I often refer to the 5 levels of relationship development, which we'll be talking about today. I don't have time to explain the 5 levels in every episode, so go grab the book, Mastering Boundaries. This is going to help you understand all 5 levels of relationship development. You can get the book on Amazon. I will link it below, and that's going to give you context as I talk about these different levels of relationship development. Whether or not you know the 5 levels, this podcast episode is still going to be helpful. So one of the first things that nobody tells beginners when they're first learning how to share their emotions in relationships is that you have to understand what level of relationship you are working from, because this is going to help drive what the purpose of sharing the emotions in that relationship even is. Now, what I find is that when most people come in to see me for coaching or support, what we're working on is helping them to develop level 4 relationship development with themselves, in the presence of anyone, in the presence of whomever they're around. That being the case, when you're working on relationship development with someone else, it's really important to understand in what ways sharing your emotions is going to be helpful and how to do it and what the purpose is. Now, if you're working from relationships level 1 or 2, you are not sharing your emotions in order to go deeper with each other. You're not sharing your emotions in order to be understood or to be validated. That's not really the purpose of sharing the emotions in a relationship level 1 or 2, or in a relational moment level 1 or 2. So you might be in a relationship that can maintain level 3 most frequently, or maybe even touch into level 4. But when you're working on a relational level 1 or 2 issue, it's really important that you understand that you're not sharing your emotions in that moment to be understood. And that's because either you do not yet know how to share your emotions in a way that is safe enough for the other person to really hear you, understand you, and validate you. Or it can be that the other person cannot hear you in a safe way, no matter how safe your communication is. Or it can be that there is some combo of both. When I mention safety here, I'm not just talking about physical safety. For most of the clients that I work with, what they're more working on is emotional safety. So most of the clientele I work with already has physical safety established. If that is not your situation, please focus on getting support for that first. And then we begin to look at psychological and emotional safety and how do you establish that so that you can go further in your relationships. But it's really important to know that if you don't yet have that solid enough, or if you bump up against a moment where triggers or flares or activation happens and it actually ruptures or drops that safety layer, then you do have to be able to go back and attend to that. And if that is the case, then you are not sharing your emotions in that moment in order to get understanding and validation. The reason that you share your emotions when you're working on a level 1 or level 2 issue is so that you can clarify your needs for safety and learn how to set boundaries. And most often, the person you're going to be sharing your emotions with is going to be yourself. So it's not that you can't share your emotions with another person, but generally what's most helpful is to share your emotions with yourself in a very clear, very honest way so that you can clarify your needs for safety and so that you can assess what boundaries that you need in order to maintain or advance your own relationship development with that particular person. It's even the same if you're working on your relationship with yourself. If you don't have enough emotional and psychological safety with yourself, it really is important that you're not sharing your own emotions with yourself to understand and validate yourself. I mean, really what's most important is that you get the help or support you need to first learn how to even be emotionally safe with yourself. And there are times as you're advancing in your relationship development that the higher level relational needs begin to be placed on you, even in your relationship with yourself. And that can at times rupture those lower levels if they're not strong enough, which is really common because most often we just make those levels strong enough to be at whatever level of relationship development we're at. So when needs begin to arise for the next level, it is very common that the weight of that does put some pressure on those lower levels, and you do need to go back and you do need to reinforce them and make them stronger again. And that's why you can actually feel emotionally safe as long as you're staying in a certain limit. And then as soon as you begin to go into deeper layers or into more expanded layers of communication or sharing things more honestly, more deeply, sometimes you'll notice that the safety starts to rupture. That's because you actually do need to go back and attend to level 1 and 2. And that's where, again, you'll need to clarify your safety needs and you'll need to clarify what boundaries need to be in place. And that can look like different agreements. It can look like getting support. It can look like understanding emotional neglect or emotional abuse, even in its very subtle forms. All of those things, as they get worked out, it becomes more and more safe to go into the higher levels of relationship development, where then you can share your emotional world more and more authentically and feel safe doing that and have it actually support the relationship and feel like it creates a deepening experience, instead of feeling like, geez, every time I share my emotional world, it just doesn't go well, and then I just want to repress my emotions again. If that is happening, then it's a pretty good indicator that you're capped at level 3 for sure, but probably you're even capped at level 1 or level 2. And so you'll need to go back and do a little bit of work there. So it doesn't mean you should not be sharing your emotional world honestly. It just means that you need to start with sharing it with yourself in order to clarify your emotional safety needs and your boundaries. And then from there, what you want to do is then you want to learn how to start to communicate those. Now, if you're working from level 3 emotional development, then the purpose of sharing your emotions is to establish and maintain the initial bonds and connections of relationships. It's also to help you foster goodwill and to help you problem solve where there is a mutual reliance around individual interests. So here you're generally not sharing your emotions in order to more deeply understand each other or the relationship. Here you're really sharing your emotions in order to get your personal needs and desires met, and in order to meet their personal needs and desires, but specifically around the areas where there is a mutual reliance on helping you each create your individual interests. And a lot of long-term, even marriages, do cap out at level 3. And when that's the case, then this becomes the purpose of sharing your emotions at level 3. And level 3 is an interesting experience because for some people, level 3 feels really fulfilling. When relationship development levels 1 and 2 are satisfied enough and level 3 needs come online, and especially if those needs are getting met, it can feel really, really fulfilling. But when level 3 needs are met sufficiently and for long enough, level 4 needs are going to begin to arise, and that's really natural. And one of the things that confuses people more than anything else is why they can feel so much love, so much care, and so much safety in a relationship for that love and care, but not enough safety to go deeper. When that's the case, you really know that you're dealing with a level 3 relationship or a level 3 relational moment. And a lot of people get confused in this spot and they think maybe my relationship isn't as good as I think it is because I do love them and I do care and I feel loved and I feel cared about, but I don't feel like I can go deeper. So maybe that just means my relationship isn't as good as I thought. And what I say is both things can be true. What's probably true is that your ability to go into level 3 and maintain level 3 is actually really good. And that is great in comparison to those who are capped out at level 2 or even level 1. So your relationship is better than certain relationships, but yeah, it may not be able to go into and maintain level 4. In our culture, that's pretty common. So a lot of people are now learning how to share more authentically, more honestly, really share what their thoughts and feelings and perspectives are. And that's kind of a newer thing. And that's because we're just starting to tap into level 4 relational experiences more and more culturally as a whole. And that's a natural outcome when the safety layers are in place more and more, which for a lot of people is beginning to become more and more the case. So at this level, you can share emotion to acknowledge appreciation, to say, oh, thank you so much for doing that. It means so much to me. Maybe even, I love you, I care about you. Those are really things that can help to fulfill and establish goodwill. Also at level 3, you'll see that you can share your emotions from a personal perspective or an individual perspective about external things, and usually that will go pretty well at level 3. So what that means is that you can share your emotional experience about stories or about things that are happening to you. So let's say you go out to eat with your partner or with a friend, and something happens while you're at the restaurant. Maybe the waiter is acting really dismissive or something weird like that is happening. And you end up saying, like, I feel so frustrated about what's happening right now. Or that waiter is acting like such a jerk. I'm so annoyed. And that can actually sometimes help to foster the connection between those two people, especially if there is a similar experience going on. Now, if there's a different experience going on and one's really frustrated and one is not, then you can start to get into some energetic bumping against each other, especially if you don't know how to go up into level 4 at that point to actually discuss that difference. If at level 3, you're able to share your emotions and you have a similar response, sometimes it can kind of create an experience of being allies or being on each other's team. So there are times where sharing emotions about the story or the context or something outside of yourself can help to connect you. And a lot of times that is how people share with each other their emotional world at level 3. They tend to share it through story about what's going on with this person or that person outside of themselves. So they tend to externalize it, what's going on with your boss, what's going on at work. And you're generally not talking as much about the present moment, nor are you talking as much about differences, nor are you talking as much about the relationship itself between the two of you. Now, if you're wanting to practice sharing your emotions about the present moment, if you're wanting to share your emotions about differences, if you're wanting to be able to share your emotions about anything with friends or with anyone, if you are in a relationship that's capped at level 3, you can do that. So what I would tell someone is if you're wanting to practice sharing your emotions honestly in the presence of anyone, definitely feel free to do that. It can be a really important practice. It's a practice that I have taken on in my life. And it's important to understand that the reason and the purpose for taking that practice on is not so that I can necessarily develop my relationships with others. That may or may not happen with some people, but it's really in order to help me to go into a relational development practice at level 4 with myself. And so I know in those moments when I am taking on that practice, I'm doing it to develop further into my relationship with myself. And then from there, what will often happen is you will tend to be more drawn towards people who give you feedback that you can actually do that relational development with them as well. But initially it can be confusing because you might be in a situation where you're starting to share your emotions more honestly and you're finding that it's actually creating a lot of rub. And that could be because you're in a relationship that is capped at level 2 or even level 3. What's interesting about level 3 is that even though it's a higher level of development than level 2, level 3 does still tolerate masking in order to maintain survival. And so if someone starts to feel threatened emotionally or energetically in the relationship, they will tolerate masking from themselves or the other person in order to maintain the form of that relationship. What happens when you move up into level 4 development is that level 4 no longer tolerates masking. And this is where it becomes really important to be able to unmask and share your emotions honestly for the relationship itself, not just for your relationship with yourself. So if you're in a situation where developmentally you're wanting to engage in a level 4 relationship with someone else, then yes, the purpose of sharing your emotions is to develop relationally with yourself, but also to develop with that other person, to get to know them more deeply, and to develop your relationship specifically, to get to know the truth about your relationship specifically. So the purpose of sharing emotions at level 4 is to get to the truth. It's to access and identify the truth individually, together, and relationally. And this is a level that's a lot less common. There are not as many people in our culture that have the education or the skills or the practices to maintain this level. But for some people, those times are a lot more rare. So it can be confusing again when you share your emotions and you're getting a wall, or it feels like you're just getting blocked in your ability to go deeper with that other person. Now, again, it doesn't mean you have a bad relationship. It just means that that relationship might be capped at level 3. And it's important because in order to truly have a level 4 relationship, both people have to consent to that. Both people have to choose it. Both people have to want it. So for example, I might be working with a client and I might be feeling kind of confused about what's going on. What they're saying doesn't really seem to line up with what they're doing. And I might even share that confusion with the assumption that I am opening the door for them to step in and clarify what they really mean and help me understand the truth about them and their situation and what they're wanting, what their desire is, what their perspective is. But what I find is that sometimes people aren't ready to do that or literally don't have the skills yet to identify the truth in themselves and to speak it in words. And what's really interesting is to notice my reaction to that. Because when I'm holding a higher level of relational development in myself in that moment, I'm able to back off and let go of my need to know the truth and just be there with that person wherever they are. But sometimes when I'm more stressed or I'm in a struggle with myself or I'm in a lower level relational development moment myself, then I can start to feel confused and angry and guarded, and sometimes even have this story come up in me that sounds something like, this person is lying to me. Why aren't they telling me the truth about what they want? I am so confused. And I'll start to tell some kind of story to myself that they must be trying to pull a fast one on me or trick me or something like that. And it can feel so personal. So because I know enough about relational development, I'm even able to access that story, because on the outside, what it looks like is it looks more like, oh, this is just a difficult client. But when I sit with that more and I realize, oh, I'm actually having a story that they're trying to trick me or they're lying to me or they're not telling me the truth, then I can actually start to slow down even more and say, okay, wait a minute, why am I expecting them, A, to even know how to do that yet or be able to do that? And it helps me relax around my story that I'm supposed to always be the perfect helper, right? Because in order to be the best helper I can be, I do need to know the truth. The more of the truth I know, the more I can help my clients. But the truth is, again, sometimes they don't know how to access the truth in themselves at all times. And if I'm taking that personally, or if I'm not able to back off from needing to have the truth, then I can start to feel frustrated and annoyed and confused about my clients. And really, I can start to get pretty triggered. And it's the same thing in any of our relationships. If we're believing that someone can do level 4 relational work when they actually can't, it can get us into a lot of stuck places. So it's always a good chance when we're trying to do relational development at those higher levels, if we get stuck, always shift back into practicing it with yourself first, because it might be that you are having an expectation that is not aligned with reality. It's not aligned either with that person's skills, or it's not aligned with your skills, or some combo of both. So hopefully that helps you to understand some of the reasons why sharing your emotions, especially in the beginning, might feel like it's not always working, meaning it's not always helping to create the relational outcomes or desires you want. It is because different relationships function at different levels of development, and at certain levels of development, sharing your emotional world serves different purposes. And at certain levels of development, it is more functional to start by sharing your emotional world with yourself or with someone who can do higher levels of relationship development, maybe even a relationship professional, a coach, a therapist, someone who can actually help you to sort those emotional things out. And then you can go back to that person and either set the boundaries that you need, or if you're working from a level 3, you can continue to develop the goodwill, the connection that you want, and to continue to invite someone to join you at level 4 development in healthy ways. All right, go get the book Mastering Boundaries, and next time we'll be at part 2, talking about what people don't tell beginners when they're learning how to share their emotions in relationships. Take care. Bye-bye.